Trigger warning. This video contains mentions of suicide and death. People who have died or had a near-death experience, how did it affect your views on religion or an afterlife? Religion, not so much, and afterlife, not at all. What they did was affect my views on living. Beforehand I was driven to succeed in every aspect of my life. Terrified of failure, or rather criticism of not overachieving. Afterward I realized that simply doing was enough. I went on adventures, tried different careers and romanticized everything I could. Sunsets, happy dogs, good wine, beautiful women, big fish, great trucks. I got married, had kids, and wondered at their wanderings. Lots of grandkids now, and looking forward to watching them have their own adventures. Edit, hokey smokes. I'm just beginning to grasp the reality of all your kind comments. Double platinum? Geez, very humbling. Somebody let me know who I can donate this to or a cause. Not sure how this works. And as far as the comments go, I am Pacific time zone and just at my desk, but I will try to get responses back to everyone as soon as I can. Bless you all. It didn't happen to me, but my younger sister, 15 at the time, she was a passenger in a Polaris Ranger when the driver swerved into a ditch. She flew out and the Polaris landed on her legs. She laid there for over 2 hours waiting for a paramedic with a broken femur and her other ankle dangling off. Anyways, she lost a lot of blood and thought she was going to die, but she said she saw Jesus come to her and hold her hand and kiss her on the forehead while she was waiting for help to arrive. She tells that story to anyone who will listen. She seems to be happier now. Less worried and mellow than before. Just seems to enjoy the moment and is more kind to everyone. I may be a little late for someone to see this, but here it goes. When I was 18 years old I had major chest surgery due to an incident I had while being in the army. I awoke after surgery only to realize I was not actually awake. I woke up to utter darkness. I could hear the voices around me talking about me, praying I was going to get better. But the voices got quieter and the darkness diminished. A light started to appear. This light was no ordinary hospital light, lamp, the sun, or anything like that. The light was so bright, yet I couldn't look away. I felt it getting closer and closer, and then I heard a voice. It was my mother's. She was talking about me, talking about how I was crying. Then I felt it. The light was right there. If I would have stuck my hand out I could have touched it. I could feel myself sobbing over what I was seeing, but I was unable to do anything. After a couple minutes of staring into the light I finally found the courage to reach out to it, but when I went to grab it I found myself waking up in my hospital bed with everyone's eyes focused on me. Now I am not a religious man by any means, so I have considered the option of my dream happening due to the anesthetic. But this did not feel like a dream, it felt too real. I still see the darkness to this day. I'm not sure how applicable losing consciousness is for minutes at a time, but I have had several seizures in my life, and in my case I stopped breathing, cause I'm too busy convulsing. In every case, I see a ring of light around the peripherals of my vision and black in the center. All I feel is being literally nothing in the vastness of my mind. Like an infinitely small point in all of my being, seeing nothing makes it hard to believe there's something more to existence than life and death, or that there is something beyond death. I would say this is pretty much the feeling I had while suffocating. You go from oh I can't breathe to sheesh I am going to die panic, in about 15 seconds. As you pass out feel no pain whilst you drop to the floor. The panic goes, your sight turns to a ring of light like other poster said. But my hearing, I can hear the person helping me, saying don't go, open your eyes, stay with me, stay with me. In my head I am thinking, let me sleep now over and over, but I can't speak. No pain, no sensations. A feeling of overwhelming peace. I am no longer afraid to die, it just affects the live ones you leave. I am 57. This experience helped me. About 6 months after this event I had open heart surgery that I had put off repeatedly, as I was previously so scared to have it done. I fractured my skull when I was a kid. While I was out, I was visited by an entity that told me that I wouldn't have to go to heaven or hell if, when I died. I was told that my life energy would be released in the form of light, and that light would shoot off across the universe until it encountered another planet with intelligent life. I could live a life there and continue the journey when I died there. I should note that I'm a preacher's kid. This totally called into question the faith I was growing up with. My nana came to visit me. She was a ball of bright energy that lived on a distant planet. She came to tell me that she would take care of my brother and he was going to pass. I woke up in tears, both moved by the visit from my nan and absolutely terrified for my brother. I called my mom to make sure my brother was okay. It was 4 a.m. He was. But died 2 months later. I always had comfort that my nan is caring for him. I was pretty dead after a car accident, back when you could ride in the back of pickup trucks. We were T-boned in an intersection, and I went into the tunnel of light. Chose to come back because I was given a choice. I missed my family, friends, and my cat, so I came back. I remember the tunnel being a white gold color, very warm, friendly, and inviting. When I woke up in the street I was bloody, cold, and in shock, but I knew what had happened a moment before. Chalk it up to extreme blood loss or dopamine release or what have you, but I know what I saw. What I got from it was that our perception of life is much like a radio that is broadcasting one frequency you can hear, but actually broadcasting all the frequencies all the time, but we choose to only tune into one. There is so much more to life and death than what we are told to believe. Be good to one another and yourself. It matters in the end. I was hit by a car head-on when I was in junior high. I don't know how fast was it, but I wrecked the car's hood and freaking flew a good 5 meters. Car also left skid marks. Now even with the damage to the car, the police wrote this up as a side swept. Accident happened in a pedestrian lane in front of the school, by the way. Anyway, I never felt the impact of the car. Everything just turned black. But I could discern my arms. I don't know, bit it's like I was floating. Then I was phallic upwards towards a ball of light. Years later I played Skyrim, and you know Meridia's beacon? Dude, it's like that. Anyway, when I was nearly with it, I was suddenly rolling in the curb. As I groggily tried to stand up, my thought processes were, sheesh, I was hit by a car. Frick, there's dirt in my mouth, and what the frick is that light? Anyway, right now I believe there's a god who started creation and later the Big Bang. But then the process happened for billions of years. I'm not really that much into religion, though I do attend a Roman Catholic Mass every Sunday with my family. Funny, but I'm teaching world religions in high school. But I try to have a balance with openness and understanding, but I would like to believe in the potential and goodness of the human spirit rather than focus on religious bindings. Had decent chats with students, and damn, I may have influenced and some atheist wannabe, but the most important thing is that ball of light could be waiting for all of us in the end. Or maybe that was just a way my battered brain cope with the car saying hello. About 13 years ago I fell into a retention pond in the middle of winter. I was wearing a down coat and despite being a good swimmer, had a very hard time getting out. In fact, I barely made it back out. I got my upper torso out of the water and fell on the shore. From there until waking up in the ambulance to the EMT saying they didn't have a pulse, I don't remember. I do remember though, while I was out, that I saw bright white mixed with memories of my uncle who had died several years earlier. At this point in my life I was searching for religion and was a pretty iffy person. After I regained consciousness and yelled I'm alive, I reflected upon my life choices for several weeks. I kept going back to the experience of near death. When I arrived at the hospital that day, my body temperature was around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It took 5 hours to get my temperature up to normal, and the doctors were surprised I was still alive. Thinking about that and what I saw made me realize that it doesn't matter what religion I choose, I need to be a better person. It took a few years for the self-reflection and inner thoughts to take effect, but I ultimately decided upon a philosophy of living instead of a religion. I chose Taoism as a basis for my philosophy of life. A few years later, around 7 or 8 years ago, I started seeing everything around me as a basis for what others might call God. I pray, but usually to nature or to the sun, depending upon the circumstances. For me, everything is connected in some way, and it is through nature I have life. Life I should be thankful for. Afterlife is complicated for me still. I basically believe a large number of things can happen after we pass and leave our physical body. However, I am adamant that in some way our spirit remains, whether imprinted upon the land or in people's hearts, or both. Our body goes back to the earth, but our inner being, our true energy, or spirit remains to give back in what ways we can. I attempted suicide by gunshot just over 5 years ago. Was found by a coworker who came to check on why I was late and got rushed to the local hospital and then flown via helicopter to a better hospital about a 30-minute drive away. Doctors claimed that I died and was resuscitated 5 times during the commute. Spent about 5 months in and out of hospitals during recovery, and the whole time I had doctors telling me that I shouldn't be alive and that something out there decided that I still have a job to do on this blue marble. Hearing some of the best doctors in the region tell me that over and over again convinced me that there is a higher power out there. I was raised by Christians, but I can't bring myself to believe that what they say is completely correct. I believe that there is a power out there that cares about us and what we do, but in my opinion, they have a goal and know the one way that we will reach that goal for us, and they are content to let us do our own thing with him, it just nudging us in the right direction and only intervening when we really F up. I had an out-of-body peak experience. Does that count? I was just walking down the street pushing my daughter who was 3 months old in her pram, and suddenly I was way up above the market house in my town. I knew that I was part of God and he was part of me. I experienced this overwhelming love for everything in the material world. It felt like it was all held together with love. Then I realized this love wasn't just for the people and IGS, but also the slates on the roof and the bricks, things we don't think of as conscious. It shocked me back into my body. It has made me less fearful of death since I believe we continue, and once you have separated from the body once, it becomes easy to believe it can happen again. Yes, and it's all temporary. Cancer scare, life gets simpler. Problems are small and laughably easy to dismiss. People seem smaller. The universe bigger, it's easier to be kinder and more forgiving, and you have a pretty big compulsion to impart any and all knowledge you have. Which some people don't want to listen to because you're dying. Makes it too real. But that's okay because you're super forgiving and understanding. So it works out, but if you live, the weight of your world smacks right back onto you. And you can carry it with your new worldview, for a while. But bills need to be paid. The money you need to earn is something you have to devote a lot of time to. It's what you have to focus on. What you think about. The universe is small again, your wife. Your boss. Your family and co-workers. What they need from you takes priority. The companies that need your money are more important than peace of mind. You're once again a cog in a very big and complex machine. And it's terrible to know that it doesn't care about you, or need you to function. But for some reason, you still can't leave it. It's worse now though, because you understand why, and it crushes you. My first ever Reddit post, I died at a gig, Pixies, way back in 1991, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a very crowded gig and they had terrible N-shaped barriers of the type which used to be common on soccer terraces, which, when the crowd surged, caused ripples like eddies in water to go through the crowd. Somebody actually died in a gig in the same venue not long after. Anyway, what happened was that, in one of the crowd surges, I was swept off my feet and pretty quickly ended up being dragged through the crowd and crushed. I was, understandably, pretty scared by what was going on and was making efforts to try to get to somewhere less crushed, but time and time again I would be swept up off my feet and dragged through the crowd. After being dragged down to the floor a few times and finding myself on the bottom of a pile of people, things started to get a little strange. The first few times down had been pretty much as I expected being walked over by a crowd would be like, panic-inducing and painful. I then reached a stage where I was repeatedly having people fall over me. They would get picked up, I would get picked up, and, as I hadn't the strength to stand, I would collapse again onto the floor and the whole process would be repeated. I know I was trampled and ended under piles of people at least 12 times, then things started to get strange. At one occasion I found that my hearing had faded away and I was in silence, and then I noticed that I was no longer feeling pain. Things seemed to be happening in slow motion and I could see, for example, a girl in heels footstepping on one of my hands, but no pain registered. Eventually, I found myself no longer constrained by my body and I slowly floated upwards, and I remember completely calmly thinking to myself that I was at last getting a great view of the gig. I could see myself on the floor, but this didn't worry me. I was calmer than I have ever been in my life. I will never be able to express the serenity I felt. Floating above myself, I found myself capable of the strangest thing. Now that I was no longer constrained by being in a body, I was able to first spin and roll and then, most incredibly, to just flow around the place. It was an amazing feeling. I had been in quite a bit of pain only minutes before, but this was not just the absence of pain. The absence of even a body had me feeling euphoric, enjoying this new freedom from restriction. I floated upwards, and I honestly believe I was out of my body up near the ceiling of the hall, when I felt what can only be described as my body coalescing again, and I started to become aware of first feeling my head again, and then feeling a sharp pain in it. I watched as below me a guy leaned over my body and he was pulling at the only part of me he could reach, the hair at the front of my head. At that moment it was like everything stopped very briefly and I was given a clear choice. I am not saying I heard the voice of God asking me whether I wanted to live or die. There was no voice, but I was clearly given the choice. I had been quite a depressed teen at the time, but I chose to return to life. I watched from above as the guy leaned over me and I noted how cool his hand-painted scene on the back of his leather jacket was. I was quite impressed with the detail in it and was still admiring it when I found myself dragged back into my body. I was now back on the ground with the guy pulling me up by my hair and trying to get an arm under me to drag me up. He took me up into his two arms and carried me back to the seated area. He sat me down and was checking how bad I was when I started jabbering excitedly at him about how I'd had a near-death experience and an out-of-body experience. He thought I was out of my mind, which incidentally, I wasn't. No drugs, not even alcohol, had been consumed. He started to take me more seriously when I was able to describe to him, in great detail, the painting on the back of his jacket, which there was no other way I could have seen. He was suitably shocked by account of what had just happened me. We sat together for a few minutes and he asked me what it was like, and I told him that it was the best thing I had ever experienced and that I had come to a few conclusions, namely, that there is nothing to fear in death, that all I could be sure of about death is that there is no pain there and that it brings about an incredible peace. I was also somehow certain that, as I was completely convinced I had been given the choice to continue to death or return to life. That there was something, some source, a consciousness that gave me that choice. I also became convinced that we are all equally significant parts of that consciousness. It took a matter of weeks for the bruised and cuts I had suffered to pass, but it took a lot longer for the sense of peace it brought me to wear off. I will never fear death again, and I will never have any time for anyone who tells me of a violent, vengeful God which makes rules and which I should fear, because I've been there. I felt it, and all it is love. I drowned when I was 8. When I finally blacked out there was basically just nothing for a bit, and then there was all kinds of light, white light, different colored flashes, and then there was what looked like a man in front of me, and he told me to go back, or that it wasn't my time. I don't really remember the exact words, but immediately after that, I woke up vomiting water on my mom, who had been giving my CPR, and then I spent the rest of the night in the ER, where I kept puking again, and now here I am. Just about 20 years later, I've never really considered myself devoutly religious. I'm mostly an agnostic Jew, but I think because of that event, that there must be something. Conversely, my dad died of a heart attack in the back of a cab and was legitimately dead until they stuck a needle in his heart as a last-ditch effort, and after he came back he told everyone who would listen that he experienced absolute nothingness. So, I don't know what the truth is, but I believe there's something. 55 miles per hour head-on collision, in the backseat. Collapsed lung, broken ribs, had a 95% chance of dying that night according to my doctors. Also had surgery without painkillers or anesthesia. You appreciate every little gesture from everyone who shows they care. Everything has so much meaning, you really do romanticize every tiny detail. You memorize patterns in a moment that you are happy so you can always remember it. You know that any moment can be the last, but not in a bad way. In a calm, welcoming acceptance where you embrace all life has to provide. I had anxiety issues before the wreck. Not anymore. You don't fear failing all the what-if scenarios. You just know that anything is better than what you went through. And you appreciate everything and anything. It's all better than what almost happened. Religion and afterlife didn't change. I had no faith before, and nothing about what I went through convinced me otherwise. If anything, I now get why so many people do go to it. They want the comfort of answers and to feel safe and protected from an unreliable existence. If I died tomorrow, at least I know I'll be in heaven and everything will be fine, and who cares if I don't have a lot of money or a poor job or whatever. I don't take any of that with me. But when you look into the eternal, you miss the present. And that's what I learned about the afterlife. Don't rely on it. Make the most of what you have and what life presents you right now. Don't spend your life surviving, spend it living.